Hi, I'm joined here today by three people who are almost always the smartest people in the room, except for perhaps this morning. And that's a good thing because the topic today is a tough one, but a very important one. It's Moneyball philanthropy. That's using metrics and data to evaluate the efficacy of your giving. I'm going to start with Barry, but before I do, I'd like to watch this very short video from the Robin Hood Foundation.
Hey, how you doing? Johnny T here from Glove and Boots. Robin Hood asked me to explain to you what they do. They fight poverty in New York, like that guy Robin Hood, from which they take their name. Hey, how you doing? I steal from the rich and give to the poor. Robin Hood 101. Boom. Every cent of every dollar donated is put to work. Check out this pie chart. 100% of that pizza pie is going to fight the poverty. And that is New York pizza, my friend. Boom. No endowment.
Hey,
What?
what does that mean?
It means they ain't got no money left by the end of the year.
Oh, just like me.
They use fancy metrics to get a 12-to-1 return on your investment dollar. It's like, you remember that fat kid from Moneyball? He used that metrics good. It's like everyone handling your money at Robin Hood is that fat kid. And we know it works. Robin Hood has all kinds of big shots donating their time and expertise. Financial big shots, real estate big shots, and individuals like myself fighting poverty with this handsome mug. There are nearly 10,000 poverty-fighting organizations in New York City, and Robin Hood only works with the top 2%. If one of them programs ain't producing results, the aforementioned experts are brought in to help them out. If that doesn't straighten them out, funding is discontinued. Boom, they're done. Remember that scene from that movie where Al Capone is sitting around a table with the top 2% of killers, murderers, and various do-to-dos? It's like that. In that he takes a baseball bat and cracks that one charity that ain't working out in the face. That may appear harsh, but in reality, every misspent dollar is a missed opportunity to help a struggling New Yorker.
So about halfway through that video, I guess Barry's, I guess he's your spokesfrog or whatever he is, mentions a 12-to-1 return on investment. But we're talking, of course, about investment in a charity, so it's not a financial return. What exactly does that 12-to-1 mean?
So Robin Hood starts with an overarching mission, which is to fight poverty in New York. And given that, there's a lot of outcomes that are really social science-based. You really can't, what is having a person get through high school, get an education, what does that mean? And so they tried to create, there are 2,000 charities in New York that fight poverty. We've selected about 200 of them to back. And there are program officers that follow each of those programs. And we've created equations around to try to get a handle on the various outcomes. And I'll see if I can quickly describe this. So for example, if you're going to middle school and we want you to graduate high school, because we know that if you graduate high school, just any degree, not top of your class, you're going to generate an incremental $6,500 a year of income. So that's good for fighting poverty. But there's another benefit of high school grads, which the literature talks about, and Robin Hood steeped in the literature, which is that you'll live 2 years longer. And so there's a health benefit of graduating high school. So for each organization, they create these equations that are measured against each other in balance, and we use those as the numerator, and then the denominator is all the money we give away every year, which is about $150 million. So we measure that and the impact of that, and there's two other components which are not obviously used by organizations to judge effectiveness. One of them is displacement, like what would have happened to that child if we hadn't intervened. So it's a counterfactual, and that is really the other thing, is a counterfactual. So if we put somebody in a job, what would they have done if they hadn't done that job? I was talking to David Salzman, who's the president and CEO of Robin Hood. He's here today. And about 75% of our money, so $120 million a year, is going in the educational spectrum. And as David pointed out, if you're not healthy, or you're not eating well, or you're not sleeping well, you live in a battered home, you're not going to be educated, right? So everything we do probably at the end of the day is related to education and job training, which is the outcome of that. And each of the program officers at Robin Hood works with each organization for the entire year. And they know, I'm guessing some of the questions that I might be asked, the organizations know the inputs to this equation, though they don't know their scoring. And one of the other really interesting things about this kind of giving, which is really with this overarching theme of fighting poverty, is that we're really judging not the organization itself. Like Bedford-Stuyvesant High School is incredibly successful, huge scores, great graduation rates, but we don't choose to help them. They do fine on their own. For us, it's not actually about that necessarily. We're trying to get kids through high school, any degree. It isn't necessarily the best school necessarily. So and we look at things like you saw in the earlier slides where kids might have wound up in jail or worse. All those form an equation which is dynamically changed every year. And it's tough, it's very rigorous. There are about 10% of the organizations are defunded. And the grants to each organization can change year over year. So it's hard for them because they don't know exactly necessarily where their funding's coming from, but it actually, in this dialogue with them, we're not out to shoot them, we're out to help them be more effective. I think they get better at what they do. We get better at what we do. We keep informing these equations. We're going to publish these equations. They're not published yet, but they're going to get published so other charities can look at them and then apply them to their own cause, whatever that might be.
Great. Jim, if you were going to take one metric from, or a measurement of some sort from the world of venture capital and that you think is the most important one to bring to the philanthropic space, what would that be?
Well, for sure, the characteristic that we would be most focused on is entrepreneurial and entrepreneurial team passion. And so then one can, I think, legitimately ask, how does one measure passion and are there objective characteristics? But I think it's passion and then sustained lifelong passion is the intellectual curiosity and metric that we look for, whether we're backing a for-profit mobile and social worldwide messaging service from a 22-year-old entrepreneur, or a 50-year-old medical professor from Harvard Medical School who's trying to invent a wearable device that measures blood pressure and sends data back to Mass General and other hospitals. So the characteristics are very similar. For me, what is striking and challenging but leads to great optimism, Forbes and Steve put on a wonderful medical summit in December. And I was speaking to a number of doctors, senior doctors, medical institutions, and it caused me to go back as a individual's passionate about history. And a quote from 1910, which was essentially, as we grow in our medical knowledge, it's all about the patient. Everything we're going to do is about the patient. And this was at the formation of the Mayo Clinic in 1910. Now, one can argue we've spent 100 years, if we just look at that medical profession, and I know there are brilliant doctors in the audience, but the medical profession, medical schools, medical education, certainly over the last 100 years, has not helped us fulfill that fundamental premise upon which the Mayo Clinic was based. Another metric which I think is very relevant, I am on the board of Harvard Corporation, and there are a number of individuals who will say, why Harvard? Why should we be donating to Harvard? Why should we be donating or involving ourselves in top higher ed American institutions when we have phenomenal entrepreneurs in education like Saul, who are reinventing K through 12? And a statistic which I think people may be surprised by, be interesting to see a show of hands. In the year 1900, how many in the audience, if you could show your hand, believe that there were more than 50 German universities ranked in the top 100 universities in the year 1900? How many of you might believe that? So a few hands. There were about 50 German universities ranked in the top 100. How many believe that it's less than 5 today as we look at those great German universities? And the number is 2. And so for even great higher ed institutions, and I'm focused on the United States first and foremost, if we are not innovative and fundamentally changing and developing partnerships and developing students and professors that are leading nonprofit ideas, social entrepreneurship programs, adapting quickly, there is nothing written in stone, and there's no university that I know of in the world that if it fails to innovate within 10 or 20 years will remain at the top of excellence, however defined. So the venture capital model that I see and watch and observe and have observed over the last 27 years is one where typically you can make mistakes, but you, over a 5 to 10 year time frame, have to find the right market, have scalable, high integrity management that then scale both locally and globally. And I think I'll speak to higher ed in the United States. Those are many of the fundamental same challenges that America's higher education system faces today.
And we also have, yes, we have Saul here, who is, of course, transforming K through 12 education. And you know, you're reaching, I think you told me, 10 million students a month now. They're taking some 5 million lessons a day at a very low cost basis, using and leveraging the power of technology. That's incredible reach. Is reach impact, are they the same for you, or do you measure impact in a different way?
Yeah, I think reach is on some levels it's the most superficial layer of impact, and you could do a back of the envelope, you know, what's the value of a video view, what's the value of an exercise done if, you know, you conservatively assume it's worth $1 or $2 or $5, and you can come up with a kind of a return on, a social return on investment number, but it's not a really hard, meaty number. You know, my background, I was an investment analyst, and you know, that would, we would want to go.
Also a math whiz at MIT and some other
a few other things, yes. But but we want to go deeper, and so what we're doing is, well, there's a bunch of layers that we could do. You know, if you compare it to kind of a traditional textbook, they would publish version 2 without ever knowing that it's better than version 1. They don't know who watched, who read what page, who did what exercises. Now in our world, we can do all of that, and we can do experiments. Even before the internet was around, if you were running and there's probably some folks in the audience that, you know, if you run a chain of stores or restaurants, you could dim the lighting in 10% of them and see how does that affect transaction size or whatever. That wasn't happening in our school system. Once the internet came around, became commonplace. This is A/B testing. Amazon.com can change the color of a button and see, does that affect the purchase rate? We can start to do that, but we're not trying to get people to purchase, we're trying to get people to learn. So as we speak right now, we're running 50 experiments on Khan Academy. And they're anything from, hey, if we bring the student through this series of exercises, how does it affect their retention? How does that affect their time on the site? And we're starting to really think about things like learning gain. So minutes spent on Khan Academy, we're starting to randomly give students problems that can become proxies for actually what is their current learning state. And so we're trying to come up with numbers on, you know, literally per minute learning that can be quantified. And you know, for us, 20% of our team are data scientists. The exciting thing is actually, you know, obviously we want to democratize education. We want hundreds of million people to learn from this. But the really exciting thing is that education has never had a rapid, iterative, prototyping, data-centered loop. And so we hope that we can leverage the, you know, over 1 billion problems done a day, and all of our, you know, our data expertise and big data and all of these things that people are talking about these days to do that rapid iterative loop. You know, we've been working with a lot of physical schools to measure efficacy in a traditional way, where you give a pretest at the beginning of the year, kids spend some time on Khan Academy, we correlate use on Khan Academy with better than expected outcomes. But that's a very slow process. It takes a year. It's a very messy process. Anyone who's ever worked in ed research can tell you it's very hard to control for variables. Every year, 1 million variables change. It's a different set of cohorts. It's small. It's a small data size. So if we can get better about using our 10 million students a month, or it's on the order of about 100 million a year, we can do far better controlled experiments. And a lot of the ed researchers were talking about that, you know, this is like a gold mine. They can get more data in a night with us than they've gotten in, you know, 3-4 years doing it the traditional way.
So I'm going to ask a question. So we have two sides of the equation here. We have people who give money. people ask for money. So, Saul, what's the one number when you go ask for money that you dangle in front of people? And Jim and Barry, what's the one number that you demand to see or want to see that you think all people like Saul should offer up?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would say, starting to where this conversation started, the one number we do dangle in front of people is just the sheer scale of it, where it is, 10 million students a month and doing 5 million exercises every day. That type of scale hasn't happened before in this space, and it's growing 50% a year. So that I still think is kind of what we lead with, but obviously once you go under the covers, then I actually show people the team that's working on this, where it's literally the leaders in big data, data analytics, some people coming out of, high finance are now using their minds to tackle this problem with us.
Barry, what do you want to see?
Well, I should have said I chair Robinhood for the past year and a half. So I got involved in Robinhood because every dollar I gave went out the door. The board covers 100% of the cost of the organization. So I know it's 100% flow through, which is my number one metric when I look at organizations. And my second metric would be the effectiveness of what I gave. So 12-to-1 returns and the importance of the cause, and knowing that they screen these organizations so carefully and they measure them religiously, it's like running a business. And we're also a bit of a lab for other, for charities that can be scaled, organizations that may scale across the country. So I think that's very exciting to have that impact in New York. And then maybe these organizations grow and prosper and leave New York. We talked about David Levin's KIPP Academy and some of the other places. Schools, great successes that have been incubated here. So for me, making that exponential donation that has that exponential benefit, and then having metrics around it, they're religious about this. They call it relentless monetization. It's David Weinstein, who's been there, I think, since the start of the organization. He runs this. And we've actually, our program officers go off and run charities elsewhere because they're drilled in how to measure effectiveness. So the impact the organization has is broad and national in its reach, which is even more exciting. So, but the fact that it's back with metrics that you can actually see the literature and you can see the inputs, you can see the research if you care to go there. Years ago, Ray Dalio asked us to look at, he was very interested in microfinance, and he asked us to look at he was a little annoyed with us because we spent so much time figuring out if it really was effective. And if that woman was now running this barbershop in a basement, what would she have done if she wasn't doing the barbershop in the basement? And who did she put out of business? Because that woman who's getting a haircut in the barbershop in the basement probably got her haircut somewhere else, and it might have been somebody equally impoverished. So it's microfinance lending is a very controversial subject. We took our very heavy-handed research-based look at it, worked really slowly, kind of got controversial, but at the end of the day, that's the right outcome, I think, is to make sure for me and that what we think we're doing is actually what we're doing, and our dollars are having a multiple effect.
So I don't want to be selfish here. I'm a little conscious of time. I was going to ask Jim one last question, and I was going to throw it out. So in that video from the Robinhood, we saw the guy get the baseball bat, right? And that happens all the time in the world of venture capital. The guy's not making his numbers, you fire the founder. Is that a fair sort of way to approach somebody who's devoted their life to charity and philanthropy, to measure them, to hold them to that same sort of measure? I mean, they're not trying to get rich, they're trying to do good.
The answer is yes. If we want to create scalable, great, nonprofit social enterprises, whether it's a university, whether it's a nonprofit addressing health, whether it's a young entrepreneurial company, you can do it with humanity and grace. But I find that the leaders I've been fortunate to work with, whether it's President Drew Faust at Harvard, Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook, I could go on and on. They're spectacular. Whether it's a for-profit or nonprofit enterprise, they're spectacular leaders, they're ethical, they are strategic and operational. And so I think we should hold the standards of the teams when we're looking at venture philanthropy, social enterprises, the quality of the teams, the engagement, to the same level as we would the very best internet or technology companies. I would say the metric, if I may, that I look for most often, whether it's students in a university, brilliant students at a top medical school, or middle school sixth graders in East Palo Alto, California, which is a challenged economic neighborhood. What I find in each of these institutions, which today to me is quite shocking, a minority of the class is engaged a minority of the time. And one of my hopes, a little bit of a dream, is there are teachers out there today, K through 12, pre-K, as well as in higher ed, who have found some of the new learning technologies, many of which Saul has developed, and they have turned that on its head. Suddenly, I've walked into some classrooms with great teachers or professors, and at some of the graduate schools in Cambridge and Palo Alto, and a majority of the students are deeply engaged a majority of the time, and the teachers, the really outstanding teachers, are watching. It's like a chef, a great chef, when they're cooking for a small group. They are watching the level of engagement. Where does the engagement increase? Where does the engagement decrease? And that is something over the last year or two, much through technology, but much through the great talent of teachers and professors, that I'm seeing in terms of a groundswell of support.